screen you want to share. You just heard the countdown, the 3-second countdown, and now this is recording our session. When I was doing the recordings for Books for Students, one of the first things I did was I had to position my webcam. And if you click on this and just hold down, you can move it to wherever you want. You'll have to adjust that from piece to piece that you're doing it with, because it doesn't intuitively place itself out of the way. If your webcam is totally in the way, you can go down here to the toolbar, and this camera down here is your embedded webcam. If you click on that once, your webcam disappears. Toggle it again, it comes back. For me, I liked, as long as it was out of the way, I put mine up here at the top. So it got my eyes up. I was kind of watching myself in my presentation. It got my eyes up to more where the camera's recording. And I thought that gave a better impression to students, like I was talking to them and not to a computer or something like that. So I used the webcam just to help me personalize it a little bit more and make eye contact with my pretend audience that was there. So with my students, I would just scroll through and we would do a picture walk. And we would talk a little bit about what they were seeing in the pictures. What do you think the story's going to be about? What do you see happening? What do you think the problem might be? What are you seeing next? And I did this in like a fake conversation. It was be like, oh man, I see that all of these doors are open and people are looking at him, but he doesn't seem to be real happy. And so I would kind of envision a conversation that I would be having if it was a real live student or students there with me. Kind of ask some rhetorical questions. Wow, what are you seeing now? Yes, everyone's happy. Look how their faces have changed. I wonder what has happened in the story to make that happen. And it looks like they're cooking something really good and they look really happy. It looks like they're sharing and putting some spice into it. I bet this is going to taste really good. Has your mom ever made soup at home? How does it smell? But you just can't wait to see it, la 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 la, or taste it. And this story is a traditional tale. So I would also be talking a little bit about traditional tales and talk a little bit about the genre and get them ready for that before we started reading. So I tell them, traditional tale is something that, is a story that we can learn a lesson from. And have you ever learned a lesson in your life that, you kind of think next time you get in a situation or that, well, I shouldn't do that. Well, that's kind of what it's a life lesson. How are they going to do that? So after I'd get done with my book introduction and really trying to exaggerate the connection piece, and just as an aside, Jan Richardson through Pioneer Valley has put out some really good webinars and PDs on guided reading lessons. They put these out when the shutdown first happened, and they were getting some resources ready and they were putting things out there. And Jan Richardson is like the guru of guided reading groups. And so I watched some of her webinars on guided reading and took some of the, she had good suggestions on timing pieces to overemphasize some things that you wouldn't necessarily extremely emphasize, but you can't count on what kids are picking up or whatever. So if you want some place to go for PDs just on guided reading and some things to think about if you're recording a guided reading lesson, go to Pioneer Valley, their website, and they have a PD tab, and you can click on those webinars. It's some good stuff in there. Some of it's kind of sales pitch for some of the things, the platform that they use, but the other ones are just general good teaching. So after we got done with our picture walk, I would take them back through and I would kind of anticipate first grade readers What are some of the things they're controlling? What did I see in the story? Because I'd pre-read it. What are they going to possibly get tripped up on, and what are they going to need help with? So that's where my tools down here really came in to help. Now, one of the things that I like, this toolbar stays there constantly. This toolbar does not. And there's a little bit of a time delay when you're trying to pull up one of these tools to use to draw kids' attention to things in text or on the document that you might be using. So that takes some playing around with and getting used to for the time delay on that. This first one is a focus mouse. And if you click on that, the whole screen goes darker except for this spotlight. So in this story, when I did this book introduction with students, I took them to this page and I asked them, or I told them, there's a word on this page, on page 4, that's kind of tricky. And I said, it's the word knock. And if you look at the picture here, there's nothing to give the kids background knowledge that he's going to knock on the door. But when they come to, this word in the text, I thought that might be tricky for them. So I would kind of set them up with, well, he's going to knock on the door. Say that word with me, knock. What do you think that that's going to start with? And you're right. It sounds like, but it looks a little funny. And so I would kind of hold and hover over and show this. This is the word knocked. And then when I got done with that, I could undo that, toggle it again. The spotlight goes away. And then I would use one of these tools down here. And when you click on this, it changes shade just a little bit. And this gave me a little bit of a trip for a while because I could never figure out which one of these was on and which one of them wasn't. But this is like a target. So if you use your cursor and you hold down, the circle targets and it highlights. You're right. That's the word knock. Did you see that funny way that it starts? So then you can come back down here. The target does get in the way a little bit. So then you can come back down here, undo that, and then just use the cursor itself. Or you can use the pen, the drawing pen, to look at that. And when you click on the pen, you can choose the color you want to use. If it's a really tricky word, I tended to go more towards some of the bright, vibrant colors. If it was a less tricky word, I would go with some of the more subtle colors. But this is a tricky word, and I would, did you see those 2 letters that are making the sound? Yep. That doesn't say anything, but that's the word knocked. You just need to know the way that it looks. Now, when you come back down here and you go back to your pointer again, if I were to use my cursor and go somewhere else, oops, it's marking on the screen. It's not marking on the text. So something to keep in mind, sorry about that. Something to keep in mind when you're doing this is that you have to make sure that you erase those marks before you leave the page, because that mark is on the screen. It's not on the text, and it's going to throw off what they see on the next pages. So you can go over to your eraser, and the nice piece about the eraser is that you can see the circumference with which the eraser grabs. So not all erasers in all of these tools and systems or whatever show you that, but this is really nice. It does show if I just target that in the middle, I can erase once, swoop, and I'm done. And then I can just go back to my cursor again. One thing I did notice, oftentimes in some of my recordings, I would have this guy and I'd say, oh, there's that word cold. You see old and cold. You're right. And then I'd go over here and start scrolling through and I'd leave that target on there. That piece kind of drove me nuts. It's just an aesthetic piece. So if you don't want, when you press your cursor down over here to scroll through, if you don't want that target showing up, you are going to have to toggle that again to get rid of that. You can pause your recording. So if my telephone started ringing, or I had a dog that suddenly saw something and started barking, I could pause my recording, take care of whatever I needed to record. I wouldn't have to dump the whole recording because of some disturbance. I could just pause it real quick, take care of whatever it was, and then come back and start recording again. So that's kind of nice. Um, so we would go through and we talk about a few tricky spots. Again, I would kind of overemphasize those. So then after we looked at it, knocked, I might even put it back in context because this is going to keep coming up on all of the pages. He knocked at the door. That's the way that should sound. Can you read that with me now? And I'd kind of pause. That's right. He knocked at the door. And so this goes back to some of the Jan Richardson's pieces about overteaching and overemphasizing so that kids are ready to do that on their own, because we don't know. We're not going to be able to hear what they're doing. So we're going to assume that they need lots of support in that. So we would go through and talk about a few pages or places in the story. I might go to some of these transition words. You know, first grade, you've learned about transition words in your reading and in your writing, and those transition words are on this page. Can you find the word first, then, next, last? And I'd wait a little bit, and then I might use my highlighter and go, yep, there's the word first, there's then, there's next, there's last. So this is obviously telling a story where it's going to be, as a story unfolds over time, and it's got some of those transition words. So we would do some of those book introduction pieces, guided reading pieces to have students work. The books that I chose for recording and posting to specific students, be they my one-on-one students, my tier 3 students, or my lit group students, I would post the same lesson to several students. Because I couldn't hear what they were doing and give immediate support and feedback, I generally went at least one book level below what I thought their instructional piece was at, so that I was trying to take out as many of the sticky spots as possible so that they could be successful in their reading. Now, the one thing with Screencastify, it doesn't recognize, and LLI doesn't have a functional piece for a turning of the pages that you can control or that a student would be able to control. So one of the adaptations that I had to do for this was kind of anticipate and teach the kids, I'm going to do the scrolling. You need to pause the recording here, do your reading when you've read the pages, because I have no idea how much time they were going to need to read their pages. Did they need to go back and reread? So that took more times and things. I just taught my kids, go down to the bottom, pause your recording, read your page, and then hit play again. So I would say, now pause your recording and read. And then I would scroll on while it's recording, assume they had done that. Now pause and read. And then I would go forward. You don't have to put a lot of time in here because they're doing the pausing and the reading. Now pause and read. And so I would just keep telling and reminding those first graders to pause to do their reading. Older kids would be able to learn to quickly do that. So you probably could just give them the heads up at the beginning. You'll need to stop your recording, pause, do your reading, and then you move on when you're ready, because I didn't build those pauses in. And then when they were partway through the story, I might, if I thought it was getting to a point where there was a transition or something, boy, he sure is feeling bad and everybody's watching him. What will he do next? What will he need next? So, wow, he's changed here. Now pause and read. Let's see what happened. And some of those kinds of things. So all the way through the story, when everything was done, and you can see down here it's saying that it is recording your screen, and just like with the Google Meets and things, when you're done with all of your recording, you'll